The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
We are those guys. We hope to be your guys, bringing you the latest around the National Football League with the perspective of a former 10-year NFL veteran. He's Nick Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. What's going on, Nick?
Nothing much, man. The offseason is moving along. I guess maybe at a snail's pace, but I can't wait to the football season to start. So I don't know about you.
Well, we haven't been with you guys. We haven't been together, Nick, since after day 2 of the NFL draft. So I'm so excited to spend the next 45 minutes on rounds 4 through 7 talking about all of those undrafted free agents. No, I'm kidding. Everyone knows there's going to be diamonds in the rough. We just can't identify them in May. And as Nick aptly put at the end of our previous episode, which you can find Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts, you don't have to be drafted for good things to happen. And that's certainly in the case of Nick Ferguson manifesting himself a lengthy NFL career based on, the work that went in post-draft. So, Nick, I wanted to start by plugging our Dynasty Rewatch podcast series, right? We went 5 episodes talking about the 10-part docuseries on Apple TV about Patriots Dynasty. And I have to ask, did Netflix just produce the 11th episode of Dynasty with the Tom Brady roast?
Absolutely, they did. And I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but it's 3 hours long.
No. Oh my God. No, I haven't seen it. The fact that you said it's 3 hours long, I'm so less interested in it now.
Listen, man, there is so much information in that Netflix roast. And I'm surprised as a loyal Tom Brady and Patriot fan. I mean, you don't want to watch it. I mean, we had Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft. I mean, when you think about it, both of these guys were sitting on opposite sides of the room, but leave it to Kevin Hart. And he's able to bring these guys together for a shot toast. Like only Kevin Hart could do that. So for every fan that loves everything about Boston, Ben Affleck, Tom Brady, all of that, I mean, all that was encapsulated in 3 hours. 3 hours of people just ripping Tom. And Drew Bledsoe was there. Your guy,
yeah,
Bledsoe was there. So this was somewhat of an extension of the Dynasty series where everyone was able to get out whatever they had to say. And as long as everyone was laughing, no one can really take it serious, right? Isn't that the thing?
Yeah, I know there's the one moment that Tom did take things a little serious when the Roastmeister, Jeff Ross, which again, these guys, God love him, but he just lives underground. And then when they announce a roast every other year, he just pops up out of nowhere looking more pale and with less hair than before, as he's becoming a mole person living underground in that time between. I guess he's the one that, now I'm doing a roast. He's the one that was, towing the line a little too much when, again, they all call him Mr. Kraft. I mean, God love him. If I had $1 billion, you could still call me Alex, or that rich MFer. But it's just beyond me that Tom is going to get out of his chair and tell Jeff to just cut it out and no more of that S with, the Robert Kraft massage stuff, which again was not part of Dynasty, nor should it have been. And maybe we're just doing a greatest hits of, hey, remember Deflategate from almost a decade ago? Like, let's rehash that again. Or Aaron Hernandez, like, what a ridiculous situation that is. And let's,
hey, Alex,
I don't know.
See, you're speaking as though true to form being a Patriots fan.
No, I get it. And I like making fun of Tom too. We're hearing the same again, are we not? Oh, now I'm swearing.
Right.
Maybe I'm being defensive.
You're ready for a roast. And once again, once you agree to be roasted or be a part of a roast on the stage in the audience, you have now subjected yourself to whatever that comedian can actually come up. So even though Tom said something to Jeff Ross, that was fair game.
Yep.
It happened. No one really want to talk about it, but it's fair game. Like if they could talk about Tom being divorced, how he overcame the injuries to Drew Bledsoe to win 7 rings, and how his wife hooked up with some instructor. Right now, he's divorced. All of that is fair game.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that that's the great part, but maybe I'm just having fatigue over watching Dynasty with you. But cutting into Tom's personality and the ridiculous, the way his face looks even younger he's got to have fillers and Botox and that's fair game. I just thought there was a lot more material there, and they go 3 hours, and the clips that I did see on social are just, oh, Drew Bledsoe, hey, I'm benched again by Bill, and Aaron Hernandez, I don't know. I mean, I've just seen it too many times, or God love him. I just 3 hours, I am totally out. I listen. Can we trim some fat? Did Kim Kardashian need to be there? What did Will Ferrell add as Ron Burgundy? Like Ben Affleck? I mean, can we just kind of keep things moving here? Or
I would say this. I mean, Kevin Hart did a great job as the MC. He did a great job. But for me, the performance of the night was Nikki Glaser, right? Where she was talking about, Tom and the TB12. And if you, adopt this, me paraphrasing, adopt the TB12 method, you can lose your family, right?
Yeah.
That line, man, had me on the floor. And if you're Tom, once again, everyone knows the situation. And people took shots at Giselle. And I don't think Tom had an issue with it because they went through a divorce, and at that point, didn't really care. But who was it? Was it Jeff Ross, or I think it was maybe Kevin Hart, who talked about Tom and the fact that he's married. He's married to a supermodel, which, I mean, everyone would want to do that. But now he's getting divorced by a supermodel to date other supermodels.
Yeah.
So the life with Tom Brady, even in a divorce, even after getting roast, how bad is it to be that guy?
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings me to 2 points that I want to make on the roast before we move on to the meat and potatoes of this episode, getting back to football. I guess first, do you think that something edgy and no stone left unturned is something that's good for us as comedy or sports fans or both, compared to, some of my favorite shows right now would be Abbott Elementary, or I would watch, Modern Family, that take a more socially conscious and moral approach. We live in a world where both can be good, Nick, right?
Well, we live in a world where both can be good, but I think it's about what people want as far as what's on demand. And what we have been told is that people don't want to, they want to hear some stories about what people are doing from a celebrity standpoint, the good things, right?
Right.
But it is those things that make them human to everyone else that people want to know. They want to know, hey, listen, Tom's getting divorced. No matter how much money you have, no matter how good looking you are, no matter how many Super Bowls you win, you were just like us. You're in the film Marriage. And there were some things that was said where it was like, well, Tom is like it's like Tom was black. Like a comedian was saying, it's like Tom was black because guess what? He's not there for his kids.
Right.
And it just crossed the room because it was funny as hell, regardless of how you think about it, whether you think it was morally and ethically okay to say, but it crushed, right? So people want to see that. They also want to see that you are human, that you can sit up there and laugh at yourself. And people, look, I say, what you saw at the end of the roast, Tom roasting the roasters, that's the Tom Brady that I know that I played against. That billboard, chiseled chin, button up guy that everyone loves. There's 2 versions, right? There's Tom Brady and then there's the GOAT. So you get all that flack, all that smoke when it comes to the GOAT. And that's why it was great for me to see Tom up there to really humanize himself and take a lot of heat off of him. Because look, man, I don't know about you, but it takes you got to have some brass ones to get up there and let people just go in on you like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's obviously, being competitive. off the football field is I want to land the biggest laugh in the room. I want to get back at everyone who said stuff about me, made mess. Which, the last thing that I kind of have on the roast of Tom Brady is, with no holds barred, with no punches being pulled, is there, I guess, for athletes like Tom Brady and Julian Edelman acting as comedians for one evening versus the professional comedians, is there a certain line that maybe an athlete shouldn't cross talking about their former teammates versus, the comedians didn't meet Tom Brady before that night, but we all know of him. I don't know if there's a different line in the sand based on a personal relationship or a professional one where you're not a comedian, but you may have landed some of the best jokes that night.
Well, and former players, and that's kind of the setting that they were trying to lay out when you saw all of Tom's former teammates, is the fact that in the locker room, there are certain things that are said amongst players that are not shared with the media.
Right.
It's an unwritten rule that, okay, what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room. It's different than the whole idea of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. No, we know that ends up on
Yeah.
right. But the whole idea is being able to express your thing, yourself, and knowing as though very intimate details by certain things, you can toss those out, and knowing as though the person you're talking about, they're not going to be offended by it. Now, when we talk about comedians, see, it's almost like comedians kind of get out of jail free card because they're comedians and everyone's laughing. Some of the things they say seem to be okay, even when they're not okay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the conundrum you find yourself in. So the players did a great job of straddling that line, saying a couple of things without going over. But you can't say that for comedians because that's their craft.
Well said, Nick Ferguson. And we will hold off for now, at least until we get the rest of the Ride the Wave media together for the roast of Nick Ferguson, the roast of Alex Hardy. I mean, we can definitely make that a two-parter because I'm certainly not going to go 3 hours. That's for sure.
Right.
Even if we think we have enough material. Hey, Nick, speaking of material, as I said to open the show, we haven't been on since the NFL draft.
Yeah.
And hey, let's slap a letter grade onto, the Chicago Bears that picked 5 players, one of whom was a punter. And let's talk about big mistakes we made because one team didn't align with consensus boards. No, I don't think that's the way to approach things. Just a few days coming off the NFL draft. So here's what I'm thinking. Based on free agency moves and based on the NFL draft, we're collecting data, trying to figure out what approaches teams have. And if a team says they're all in and only sign Eric Kendricks in free agency, Ezekiel Elliott now as well, maybe they're not quite as all in as we were hoping. I don't want to tease give away your stuff entirely, but I think our thought process here is based on watching free agency and the NFL draft as we're approaching the rest of the offseason and workouts and everything getting underway. What teams, Nick, we'll do one apiece. What a team that we think is ascending better than we're expecting them to be versus a team where they might be rebuilding already and we're just not even noticing it just yet. So, Nick, I wanted to start with the team that I think is ascending in large part because, well, they had yet another high draft pick, but also because they executed on finding guys that they can plug in immediately. I don't have a lot of nice things to say usually, but the Arizona Cardinals, I think the way that they put together their draft in tandem with free agency filled a lot of necessary holes that they had, plus a full healthy season of Kyler Murray. They're going to be very competitive in the NFC West.
See, competitive is one thing, and I think we should kind of define what that actually means because
I'd love to. Do you need me to throw a number of wins on there? Or so my thought process is they're ascending. They just picked 4th overall.
Yeah.
That means they're a terrible football team. They had one of the worst defenses. They didn't have Kyler for half the year, but I loved the additions. Sure, Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's just set the 4th overall pick aside. But the additions of Darius Robinson and Max Melton, Elijah Jones, that's an end and 2 corners, premium positions, guys that started in college for multiple years that can immediately make an impact for this Cardinals team. They're plugging holes in necessary areas while attacking areas that needed, let's say, youth and a little promise and competition for their NFC West rivals. With receiver cores out the wazoo for Seattle and the Rams and the 49ers, I don't think it's impossible to put the Cardinals as a wild card team finishing better than both Seattle and LA. How about that?
Okay. So thank you for that. The way that I hear being competitive, that's having maybe one or two more wins than they had last season. And as I check really quickly, the Cardinals was like the last team in that division. They finished 4-13. Yeah.
Yeah, they can win 9. They'll win 9.
Well, listen, Colin was injured. he was trying to remind people of what he was before he was injured. Now, did they pick up Marvin Harrison Jr.? Yeah, that should help out. But is it going to be enough to make them truly competitive in that division? You still have Seattle, who has a new new head coach, who's a former defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. They're going to be much better. And then you think about the San Francisco 49ers. They're always in the hunt. How much did they lose this offseason? Not that much. And then I know that the Rams lost Aaron Donald, so they may be considered to be somewhat of an afterthought. But I got to give it to Sean McVay because he finds creative ways to get that offense moving. So being competitive, ascending, I don't know. I mean, winning 6 games opposed to winning 4 games, yes, that is ascending. You are trending in the right direction, but it's not going to be enough to make a huge impact. But maybe the moves that they make over the next couple of years will put them in the conversation. But yes, I would agree, ascending they will be because they're not going to win 4 games again this year, are they?
Well, apparently I think they're going to do more than double their win total. So maybe you and I have different definitions of the word. I just think, adding 12 draft picks plus the undrafted free agent class, they put Jonah Williams to go opposite Paris Campbell. They're building something, right? We weren't really sure what it was that they were trying to do. Obviously in purgatory, missing Kyler Murray for half the year. I'm feeling optimistic for them. And the division seems a lot more winnable than it used to be, even with San Francisco right where they are. The other teams in the division are getting better. Nick, do you have maybe a more clear but less bold ascending team than I do for the NFL based on free agency and draft moves?
Well, the team I have is the Tennessee Titans. I know individuals feel a certain type of way about Will Levis. They didn't feel as though he was great coming out of college. And last season, the team didn't do as well because they finished 6-11. Now, Houston won the division at 10-7, and CJ Stroud was kind of a revelation because he was shocking. No one predicted that he would perform or the Texans would perform the way that they did. But when you think about what Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan have quietly put together, because no one's really talking about it. You already had a veteran in New Hopkins. They added Kevin Ridley. Burks is still the young receiver. He should be better, this year. But then, before we jumped on, I saw that Tyler Boyd, who's quite familiar with Brian Callahan, both are familiar with one another from his days in Cincinnati, signed a 1-year deal. So,
I love that for them.
Yeah. So when you think about what they've put around Will Levis, they're giving him an opportunity. Now, Tony Pollard is now one of the running backs for the Tennessee Titans. We know what he could do out of the backfield with the ball in his hands. But then you look on the defensive side of the ball, right? The things that they were able to add. I mean, bringing over Ladarius Sneed from Kansas City, to me, that was a huge move because it allows the Titans to actually get the ball back from the offense so they can play more man-to-man coverage in that division. So based on that, I got the Tennessee Titans definitely ascending and definitely being real competitive, and which has developed into a really competitive AFC South.
I love this because the Titans on the other side of the coin were going to be my team that I think are a lot further away than we think. And it's not just about an assessment of Will Levis. I'll just gloss over this before I let you snake and take your team. But I just think that paying out a ton of money for players in free agency, a Calvin Ridley, a Lloyd Cushenberry, look, you're going to get starter level talent, but you're going to have these veterans, aging veterans at that are going to be on your books for the next 2 or 3 years. I didn't necessarily envision Calvin Ridley being a $50 million guarantee type of player based on his past production. The Tyler Boyd thing is interesting because now you obviously have DeAndre Hopkins and Ridley, and you mentioned Treylon Burks and Tyler Boyd's in there. Plus you've got the 2 running backs. You've got a lot of pieces that are going to have to fit together. And then when it comes to the draft, having J.C. Latham, we said all along they were going to take a tackle. We could bet the house on it. Brian Callahan was going to get a stern talking to from his father, Bill, probably one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. So that's another reason that they could be ascending, right? There's a senior voice and a talented one there to uproot one of the worst offensive lines in football last year. But I can't be down on them for one draft pick, but what is T'Vondre Sweat doing there? Or what are the Titans necessarily doing picking him in the second round like they did? He's a guy that was pulled over and assessed a DWI the day before he was supposed to visit with the Titans, right? The day he was supposed to visit before the Titans. It's just at that point when you've just about completed everything, you're not taking football seriously. And how long ago was it? 3-4 years were removed from Isaiah Wilson, who was, again, an incredibly talented in the trenches offensive lineman, Sweat playing nose tackle, that they drafted somebody who wasn't committed to football. He was a top 10 pick, which is a much greater leverage than it would be on a second round selection at a position of need, right? Danico Autry just left and Jeffrey Simmons needs, more beef on the defensive line. But I don't understand why they're doing this again. It's Rand Carthon. It was John Robinson that made the previous pick. But if you're not committed to football, I don't understand why you're going to go out on a limb and, again, with the consensus boards, reach on a guy that didn't seem serious about football a month before his professional career was about to start.
Well, what happens in some of these cases, and we do it as people, we do it as parents too, we do it ourselves, we can justify anything that we want to justify at any moment. And leading up to this point, okay, well, how did the Titans view this kid, right? Maybe he was squeaky clean this entire time and they looked at it and said, you know what? Yeah, it doesn't look great on the surface, but he's never really had issues like this. So bringing him into the fold, maybe to change. Think about it. I mean, look, your Patriots have done it with Aaron Hernandez. And not saying that this kid is Aaron Hernandez.
Here we go with Aaron Hernandez.
No, what I'm saying, it happens in locker rooms all the time. You see a guy who may have a couple of red flags, some iffy marks, in his file, and you think, you know what? We bring that guy into our locker room. Based on who we have, they will be able to bring him up to speed and bring him under their wing. Sometimes it works well, and sometimes, as we've seen, it doesn't. So this may be an opportunity that they're giving a kid, and the kid say, you know what, man, my bad. I got a little ahead of myself, a little early celebration gone wrong. And we've all been in those situations where we've done something that, is not major, it's minor. We wish we could have. So maybe they're looking at it in this particular way. If the kid plays wild, guess what? No one cares. It'll be as though it never happened.
Yep. And we'll delete this podcast episode, or I'll edit out the part where I said that I was worried about. That's right. Yeah. Obviously. So Nick, if you're high on the Titans, who's a team that you think are still kind of rebuilding and aren't quite ready to be on that competitive stage?
It is the Cowboys, man. Believe it or not.
Man.
And the reason I say that, okay, when you look at Dak's contract, right? That's up
or lack thereof.
The lack of Mike McCarthy. You look CeeDee Lamb, and you have Michael Parsons, who's coming up as well. So if you're Jerry, what are you going to do? I mean, they even went back in time and said, we got to put the band back together, right? We got to go all Blues Brothers, Jake and Elwood, and they got to bring back Ezekiel Elliott back because they realized they somewhat made a mistake. They put all their chips on Tony Pollard, who's now with the Titans. Mm-hmm. So they need to bring someone in there because the run game wasn't what it needed to be. Now, is Zeke what he was a couple of years ago? No. But when you put him in the right situation, he still has the ability to be efficient. So with a lot of that roster kind of turmoil going on, to me, I think Dallas is in getting set for what could be a huge rebuild and a reset for that team, which is going to really frustrate a lot of the Cowboys fans.
Well, again, they won 12 games last year. They won 12 games the year before that. It is tenuous at the very least to say that, look, they're just going to run it back and everything's going to be fine. And, Stephen Jones basically said we didn't have the cap space to sign a guy like Derrick Henry who wanted to be here. We wanted him to be here. 1 year, $8 million deal with the Ravens. And look, maybe there's a little more punch in a Derrick Henry than the 2023 Patriots rushing leader in Ezekiel Elliott, but that's all subjective. I'll just say very quickly before Nick, we split. The Chargers picked 5th overall, and I think they're going to be picking top 10 again after this season. As great and ascending as Justin Herbert is as a talent, there are still so many pieces away from putting this all together. Joe Alt and oh my God, I'm blanking on the left tackle. Joe Alt and
For the Chargers?
Yeah, out of Northwestern. Massive. Rashawn Slater, my goodness, I had to Google this. Full transparency. Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt are going to be your bookend tackles for 10 years. And Justin Herbert's going to be thrilled about that. But still, without making huge additions at running back, receiver, and still having a ton of holes on the defense, I think they're still a year or two away, frankly. The AFC West is going to be the hardest division in football, playing against Bo Nix twice a season. It's just going to be too much for them. In all seriousness, they're going to have a massive cap space, and it's kind of shooing some of these defensive guys out the door. They got one more year of Khalil Mack. They'll get one more year of Joey Bosa, and then they're going to start to see the defense rebuild. I think based on the tackle play, the offense will be middle of the pack. But you can't just insert Jim Harbaugh and turn a 5-win team into something that is going to be postseason bound this year. So that's kind of my thought process on the Chargers.
I mean, I can see that. The idea is playing for the future. That's the same situation the Broncos find themselves in with Bo Nix, right? The Chargers have their quarterback of the future. It's about surrounding him, with talent, having a guy who can stretch the field in between the hashes with a tight end. But also, I mean, you lose 2 or your marquee wide receivers. I know Mike Williams has been hurt, over the past couple of years, but you lose arguably your best route runner in Keenan Allen. And, when you look at the running back position, Austin Eckler was huge for them. I mean, he was a huge check down, almost like, when you think about Drew Brees, right? And being able to throw to Alvin Kamara or Darren Sproles. I mean, now Herbert really doesn't have that guy. So this team is in somewhat of a rebuild. And just look at the coach they have in Harbaugh and the kind of contract that he has. I think it's 5-6 year contract. Well, they know we're going to wait. We're going to be very patient. And what they're going to try to do is the same thing that Jets fans have tried to do for almost 20 years with the Patriots. We're just going to wait them out, right? That's their philosophy. So the Chargers fans are starting feeling the same way. We're going to build for the future, but we're going to wait out Patrick Mahomes. At some point, it's all going to fall apart. And when it does, we're going to be right there to pick up the pieces. But you and I both know that's not how this works. NFC, yes. AFC, no, because Patrick Mahomes isn't your only worry, because there are other guys. I just talked about Will Levis.
Yeah.
About everyone else, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, right? Justin Fields or Russell Wilson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is not an easy cakewalk for the Chargers, but they're planning for the future, and that is their game plan. We're just going to wait them out, and we're just going to be right there to pick up the pieces, just laughing, almost like this is a Tom Brady roast as they take over the AFC in their mind.
Nick, now we get to before we split, Nick, just a quick thought. One of the NFL draft stories that we really didn't touch on, maybe in part because they didn't have a first round pick. Eventually they did. Maybe because in part they didn't win a lot of games last year. But as a law abiding citizen, as an adult man living in society, David Tepper's hat removal of that bar manager. So in the Charlotte area bar, Tepper was on his way to the facility to take part in the NFL draft. And there was a sign out front that said, please let the coach and GM pick this year. Tepper walks in and talks to the manager, but takes his hat off first. Nick, before we split, look, you haven't done a podcast with a hat off yet. Is that something that is like a generational thing? Is it a rich person thing? Never in my life could I imagine someone taking my hat off. Again, grown man working at this bar, grown men doing this podcast. What is David Tepper doing?
Well, Tepper's doing Tepper type of things. And when you're a billionaire, just think about that. That's with the B, right? That means you have a lot of zeros in your bank account. And for some people, it's the idea that I can do whatever the hell I want to whomever the hell I want to do it to. Don't forget what happened at the Panthers game last year when I think it was some beer was tossed on the field. Now, that is behavior unbecoming an owner. If a player did that, people will lose their mind. But when you're a billionaire and you're part of the Billionaire Boys Club, you can basically do whatever the hell that you want to do. Or at least that's what you think. And that's what Tepper seemed to be Tepper's mentality.
Well, shout out to the bar. Following the draft, the sign out front said, hats off to the new Panthers. Love me some wordplay to sort of jab things back in the other direction. He's Nick Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. You can listen to those guys anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. And as we continue to go through this NFL offseason, we'll be looking at some of the other moves teams made during the draft and free agency, kind of what to expect, and certainly some juicy dates on the calendar coming up, like the NFL schedules around the corner, as well as, we're Tyler Boyd signed today. I appreciate that update. There's still a handful of players out there that we're curious to see where they might go. So until then, he's Nick Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. Nick, what do you have to say for the people?
Before you meet your in-laws, make sure that you have on a clean pair of undergarments and you take your hat off when you walk in their house.
Don't let them take it off for you.